Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Tech Sharmit podcast, a show where we bring you the conversation with the brightest mind shaping the future of tech industry. And today we are here with Stuart Ashby, joining us from the United Kingdom. Stuart is a standout voice in the modernization of mainframes. He is also one of the well-known Planet Mainframe Influencer and a transformation leader who brings a wealth of knowledge with his expertise. Not only this, he's also been a driving force behind the GS UK application developer track. So today we will explore the real behind the scenes strategies that power legacy transformation, but also we will discuss about his professional journey. So before we proceed further with this podcast, I would like to thank Stuart for joining us today in this episode. And now I request you to please initiate the discussion by telling us something about yourself.
Well, I'm very surprised to be invited. It's always great to have a conversation about the things that I love, and mainframe DevOps and modernization is one of the things I do love doing. So I'm excited to contribute to the ecosystem that you've clearly created on your YouTube channel.
Yeah. Okay, so Stuart, let's start with from the very initial days of your journey. So, because you are driving a modernization in this one of the tech's most complex spaces, that is mainframe. So let's rewind. So what was your exact why when you started with this industry, and how you decided that this is the technology from which you want to start your career?
Okay, so based on the white hair, I've been around a long time.
Mm-hmm.
In 1982, I left school, 16, and started a journey actually as an industrial chemist for a sugar refining company in the UK.
Okay.
And I was doing that alongside education to become an industrial chemist. And I got to 18 and looked at my boss, who wasn't that much older than me, and thought, wow, this is going to be tough to have a career. And at that time, 1984, the company had just bought a mainframe to centralize data processing from the factories. The factories all had Unix based systems. And on a nightly basis, those 13 factories would transmit the data to the central location where I just happened to be working
Okay.
for the mainframe. So, junior operator job became available. I took it. It was shifts. It didn't bother me, but the money was significantly improved because of that privilege. And back then, IT or personal computing involved quite a big thing on a desktop with two 5 1/4 genuine floppy disks, one for your operating system, one for your data. And I've done a little bit of automation of the lab processes using back then Lotus 123.
Mm-hmm.
But going into the mainframe, the world of automation at that very beginning was very lucky because we started off releasing jobs manually, and a product that is now called CA7 came along, and we converted all of our manual scheduling into automated scheduling. Then output distribution, we used to do tons and tons of line flow. That went to spool delivery systems. So I got to work on building those. So throughout my journey, we've gone from manual to automated, whether it's in a lab environment or a mainframe environment. And I've never looked back. And I wouldn't change my journey for one thing. I love the mainframe community and the ecosystem around it. So if anyone's listening and they've got an opportunity to have maybe a year in an organization that has mainframes, don't be scared of the fact you're being put into a legacy environment. It could actually be a legendary environment, as April Hickel described the mainframe.
Yeah, and I think this is a phrase which is nowadays popular a lot because same thing. Lots of other podcast guests also mention about the mainframe that it is not a just a it is not a legacy, but it is a legendary technology. So I think every time like people repeat this thing, I'm sure like with this kind of repetition, it is quite clear to everyone that no, it is not going somewhere, and it is still playing a vital role in this industry. So thanks again for mentioning that it is a legendary technology, not a legacy technology. Okay, so next thing, Stuart, like whenever we discuss about the mainframe, we all know that it is known, well known for the reliability, right? So when we talk about your approaches, because you also help companies to modernize with the without losing their reliability, right? So what is your approach? Like, is there anything particular you perform during deciding the like modernization approach, anything, any particular roadmap that you follow?
There are a couple of strong indicators I find for
Okay.
success.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so in the distributed world, things like DevOps have been an approach for quite some time. The mainframe's always done something very similar, just not called it DevOps. But
Okay.
I think when you lean into what the distributed world have been doing successfully, that's where the biggest rewards come from any kind of modernization. So introducing continuous integration tools, but let's
Okay.
not necessarily think we have to have the ones that are ported to the mainframe. Yes, there are tools that have been ported to the mainframe, but there are lots of mainframe products that are aware of GitHub and Jenkins,
Hmm.
the big tools that are in the market for those automation approaches
Yeah.
make things a little bit easier because fundamentally now the mainframe is just another server in
Right.
the data center. It fits in a rack. It might have some interesting doors, but it's ultimately just that server. So if we can approach development in a similar way that VS Code or an IDE of choice, whether it's IntelliJ or an Eclipse based offering, then everyone can work with it. Because I've met lots of polyglot developers that have 5 or 6 languages that they know just enough of. And
Okay.
with linting in the IDE and autocomplete from the IDE, COBOL is pretty easy to pick up. And even, there's a lot of PL1 support out there as well. So if I'm a developer who needs to get data from the mainframe using a stored procedure these days, it's much easier with the IDE, but then they don't have to learn anything weird. I used to really find it was a friction point if someone had to go to the mainframe and then they'd
Hmm.
open their book and they'd have instructions for getting into an emulator and they didn't really know what they were doing. They're just following instructions. And if the screen that came up wasn't a screen they recognized, they were stuck and they had to go to help desk or dev support or something. They weren't independent. They weren't able to make the change that they needed to make in their way, in their time, in their location.
Okay.
And that's where I think that modernization is a big topic. But for
Yes.
me, from a development perspective, I'm just keen to try and make the approach the same. And whenever anyone as a customer says that's how we've always done it, that's the culture change that we need to focus on. Because it's not about doing things differently, because perhaps the rest of your development organization off host are already using this approach. So it's
Right.
not about being a unicorn, it's actually about bringing that commonality to the mainframe environment.
Correct. Yeah, and also like when I did some research about your profile, so I found that you also bring a vendor neutral lens to the transformation. That is very key functionality, I would say, about this technology. So why you think, like, why it is so important nowadays, and how do the clients can respond to this kind of approach where we are talking about the vendor neutral? So like, what is your thoughts on it?
Sure. In a DevOps tool chain, it's all about having links that do certain things, and companies will have great innovations. Sometimes products in a company's portfolio, vendor portfolio can perhaps doesn't get the love that it needs to become, CI tool aware. Maybe there's an open source option that comes out that you can investigate that fills a gap. So I'm a great believer that you start with what you have, but as organizations mature or indeed vendor pricing structures change, then it's much easier if you're vendor neutral rather than all in one under one company to swap things out for improvements, whether that improvement is technology or financial,
Okay.
or also to fill gaps that you currently have that you want to improve on. So that vendor neutrality, I'm a great admirer of Broadcom and BMC and IBM. All of their tools are all fantastic in their own right, but it doesn't mean that you have to be aligned to one. One of the tools that I mentioned earlier is a CI tool, Jenkins. In the last 2 or 3 years, definitely seen a shift from Jenkins as the de facto CI tool to more of GitHub, GitLab users, because they're putting source code for the mainframe under Git. They're going to use the CI capabilities of those tools. So then it becomes blended. So there's tying oneself down to perhaps one vendor and one product can be a friction point that is worse than looking holistically and trying to find the best fit.
Correct. Yes. And I saw one of your article that is related to could Z also stand for the zero waste? So this sounds very fascinating. So I'm sure like most of the audience already know about this article because they regularly follow your articles. But if someone is there who are not who are not into your network, who is not
Mm.
understanding this terminology, like could Z also stand for the zero waste? So please explain this thing, like how can mainframe technology contribute to a greener future in a very layman terminology.
Sure. So the Z in ZOS
Mm-hmm.
stands for zero downtime because production environments
Yeah.
for the mainframe can run, especially in parallel sysplexes where you have reliability and failover capabilities to provide that bulletproof environment in production. That's
Mm-hmm.
fantastic. You want uptimes of 99.999%. However, I don't believe in dev and test environments that zero downtime is necessarily the right approach. Do
Okay.
you really want to be trying to test in an environment that's been up for 36 days when your code changes or some infrastructure changes haven't been implemented because they're waiting for the next outage, planned outage, to bring those changes in? I'm a great believer in having ephemeral test environments for unit and potentially the next phase after unit testing,
Okay.
where organizations don't focus on the zero downtime. They focus on the fact it's up when they need it and then off when they don't need it. So it's not burning vital resources, costly resources in a data center, whether that's yours or in the cloud, um, for no use. So I would say, it doesn't have to be mainframe mindset in dev and test. Let's
Okay.
just use what we need when we need it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And you are regularly posting the articles. So where can people find out your articles? Like, are you also writing some blogs kind of thing or books? Anything available on the internet?
On LinkedIn, there's articles, and I do have two identities. You touched on one being my GS UK identity,
Okay.
and that's all about the mainframe. It's a conference in the UK that's mainframe centric. But then I have my work LinkedIn profile, and right now, because I work with Pop Up Mainframe, you'll see articles that extol the virtues of our product, our platform.
Okay.
So follow me on LinkedIn and you'll see those articles.
Okay, so yeah, I think LinkedIn is the best platform for anyone who wants to follow Stuart blogs and article in order to learn more about his great work regarding the mainframe industry. So that's a good way. Okay, so now, Stuart, coming back to your approach related to vendor neutral perspective. So I just want to know that like you have held many organization with cut through noises, right? So why do you think that neutrality matters so much in today's fast paced tech world where everyone is talking about AI and advanced things, right? So why you think like still the neutrality matters a lot for this fast paced tech world?
Um, I think that your every mainframe site's got a vendor or a set of vendors that are their preferred ones. So this isn't
Mm-hmm.
about from the neutrality perspective. It's not about not using the company contacts. These days almost all of the vendors have product managers. So what I would say is get to know the product manager to influence them to show them your use case. If you can persuade them, then there's a great chance you get features and products adapted to what you and your organization need. And
Mm-hmm.
the neutrality bit though is let's not necessarily go and look at a product because that's what everyone else is doing. I think
Yeah.
it is about understanding the organization that you're in, what's available, and the skills, because it's so easy, certainly with DevOps, to someone to go and look at a product and say, oh, everyone's got generative AI. Okay, so there are a few products out there, but everyone's got generative AI. Let's go and look at all the Gen AI stuff.
Correct.
But that money that you're spending on Gen AI could be valuable in the future, but is it going to solve the problems that you've got now? So I think there's a lot of, I always talk about it's people, process, and tools in that order.
Right.
And got to bring the people along on the journey. So it's important that one big success story that has been presented at GSUK is the
Hmm.
story at LNG. And what they did was they didn't start with their tool stack. They started with what were their developer needs.
Yeah.
Okay. So they looked at what's causing their developers issues, friction points that are slowing down their productivity. And I think that's the best place to start. So they didn't just rip and replace everything. They talked to their vendors. Broadcom were involved, BMC were involved, IBM were involved, some lots of other vendors that too many to mention, and they all weighed in to help LNG resolve those issues. So the neutrality is about really getting the most out of your investment that you have already, but start with the culture and then potentially processes that are going to make it easier to get the returns.
Yes. Okay. And fine. So now we will talk a bit more about your involvement with the GS UK's application development track. So what do you think? Like, what's the most fulfilling about helping shape such kind of major industry event? Why? My question would break down in three part. Like, why it is so important for other tech expert, and also if someone is from someone has recently joined the industry, like why should they focus on such kind of event by volunteering or by joining or by giving the presentation here?
Okay, so I'm going to start with that last point first.
Sure.
The networking capability
Yes.
at GSUK. You go first year, you might just be a complete observer. That you go from sessions that there's many tracks to get involved with. You don't have to align to one track, but
Mm-hmm.
in the downtime, you're going to meet a lot of people. And
Correct.
I was doing some research on your YouTube channel, and lots of names that are on your YouTube channel that you've talked to in this podcast series are going to be
Yes.
at that event. And do you know what? If you wander up to them and say, "Hi, I'm Stuart, and I saw you on so and so," they're going to be chuffed to bits. And if you want to ask them a question, 9 times out of 10 they're going to give you some time, be generous with their time to help you. So,
Yes.
first point is it builds your network. And the number of times when we have a situation at work, and recently we've been doing lots of work with Ansible, and I said to the guys, "Hey, look, I know someone who's done some presentations on Ansible at GSUK. let me reach out to them. They came in, they helped us, they moved us on. And that came from meeting them, talking to them, and helping them promote their own brand. So GSUK is fundamentally great for networking as well as learning. Yeah, so meeting human beings. Meeting the human beings is also my motivation because it's a great event. Some people that I interacted with 10 years ago have now become friends that I talk to for all sorts of things. Um, and what's most fulfilling is that I have to sit in a room moderating the sessions.
Mm-hmm.
So the way I selfishly look at the whole event is you're going to have to educate me for the 3.5 days. It's grown from a 2.5 day to a 3.5 day kind of event. So I'm very, very pleased that the content that we generate is going to, if it's going to educate me, I feel it would be educational to anybody that comes into the room for the app dev track. So that's my motivation. That's the fulfilling bit that I know I'm going to go to a hotel. It's just outside of an urban. It's quite a rural environment, although it's near Silverstone racetrack. It's quite a rural setting, so it's not easy to get to. You're not going to be wandering off into big urbanizations for entertainment in the evening. So you have to get your entertainment there, and filling your brain full of goodness is my biggest fulfillment from being involved in the event.
Okay, and from the perspective of freshers or the newcomers, like who just started their journey as a IT guy or as a mainframe industries, so why it is important for them? Like because most of the college student who just join after their graduation or post graduation when they join the industry, so like they are not that much of aware of the networking and the projects
Mm-hmm.
in which they are working upon. So what one piece of advice is there for those person, like why it is so important for them to join? Networking is one thing, that is fine.
I think it is to realize that whatever your age, color, educational level, that there's someone that is just like you, has been on the same journey.
Correct.
And we all started somewhere. It doesn't matter how someone perceives me and my career now. I started as an operator, as I mentioned, and I had to learn the commands just like everyone else did. There isn't a magic bullet to this
Hmm.
um, mainframe world. It is easier when it's visualization in IDEs and things, but we all started with very little knowledge, knowing the basics, and it's about being curious about what's next, or how do I do that. And I used to say that the only silly question that anyone can, or there's no such thing as a silly question. The only thing is, if you don't ask a question, then that's where you might miss an opportunity. Because
Agree.
to young people or early in career people, I always ask them to be inquisitive. Ask the why. Why do we do it like this? Because do you know what? If someone can't explain to you why they're doing it like that, maybe that's a good indicator that a process has become too complicated or it's lost its way. So new early in career people can ask questions that trigger phenomenal change. So I would say, why else go there other than networking? Is to ask the why do we do it like this? Because maybe someone with a younger view on the topic or the approach can come up with something that's transformational.
Yes, and I'm completely agree with you on all these of points. And I think now, especially for those who recently joined their career, like we would recommend you to please join such events because there only like you will get an opportunity to interact with the expert and the like-minded people because everyone has their expertise on in their field. So you can just simply try to interact with them, and if you have any question, don't feel that whether you should ask or not, you just go and ask the question, you will get something better. So that's a great thing, Stuart. Okay, so we discussed about the advice, like you just gave a wonderful advice to the freshers and to the newcomers. Now my question is regarding the advice for the companies, because like what one piece of advice you would like to offer to all those company when they feel overwhelmed by the legacy tech or the transformation of the projects? So what is your thought on it?
I think the biggest thing in the mainframe outside of the production environment is accept that failure is
Okay.
almost inevitable at some level. You know, when you first start doing things, whether it's with a continuous integration activity
Mm-hmm.
or um, taking advantage of the new compiler features or the new processor hardware, there's always going to be issues. It's very unlikely that every initiative will go right first time. So
Yeah.
I would say don't fear failure, embrace it, if anything.
Okay.
There are some great things out there that assist with that mindset change. I'm a great follower of Jonathan Smart with his better value, sooner, safer, happier approach, BVSSH. Every week he sends an email. His organization sends an email, and it has maybe a cartoon or a diagram or something. It's always for me resonating with what's happened that week or that month. It's never um, easy to transform. And I think that sometimes having high expectations of getting it done in 6 months for whatever the cost, those limitations are real. You have time zones and time limits and cost limits, but you have to accept that failure will be part of the journey. Learn from it, improve on it, and go again. So that when you go to the change board for your
Mm-hmm.
change to implement in production, and they ask you how many times have you done this before, because perhaps you've automated something or you've got a good strong test pack, the answer is, oh, we've done this hundreds of times and it worked hundreds of times. So that would be the biggest thing. Expect to fail, but then make it better so that it's not going to fail when it goes live in your production environment.
Okay. Okay, so now, Stuart, we will talk about your vision. Okay, so suppose someone gave you the opportunity with full of resources, full of time, and like they ask you just to prepare, just to take one initiative. So, what one initiative would you like to take, or would you like love to launch for this tech community? What would be that?
Wow. I'm almost certain that it would be something around people skills and the coaching side of things, that giving people the time out to learn soft skills, because that's the expensive thing, isn't it? That everyone gets, we use Azure task boards, and you've got targets to hit,
Yeah.
and utilization. I think many organizations are always looking at 100% utilization. What are the people going to do this week for our company's 40 hours? What are we going to do for, let's say, 35? Because the reality is there's always admin to do each day, maybe an hour a week. But I think if I could change something
Mm-hmm.
would have a cost basis, it would be giving individuals more downtime for research. And I do see this creeping in now more in on Jira boards or in development organizations, that they don't have a task to deliver something. The first phase is to research something, so that you get that time to look at podcasts or look at GSUK virtual event recordings, to learn from people who have perhaps done those things,
Right.
rather than just taking a code snippet, putting it into, let's say, ChatGPT or Stack Overflow and getting an answer, because I must get this fixed. I must get this bit of code sorted in the next 15 minutes. That can be stressful.
Yes.
So I think that if I had that, I would hope that organizations could actually give um, engineers the safe psychological safety that's required to sit back, and when someone walks past, it might not look like they're doing something, because they've got earbuds in listening to something important, or it's not a work event on the screen, but it is related, that it's that psychological safety. So I've taken that straight from John Smart's Better Value, Sooner, Safer, Happier. But that's where I think I would like to see more time and money spent, is in that psychological safety. That's what I would go with.
Yeah, and this is one of the greatest advice, or I would say, approach that anyone can follow in order to enhance their productivity. Because when they got enough time for a proper root cause analysis and this kind of thing, then for sure, like they will enhance the productivity of their day-to-day task. So that's a great initiative. Okay, all right. So now, Stuart, we will talk bit about those person who have helped you in your journey, right? So, like we all know that behind every successful person there is a support of network. So, in your case, like who were those key people who helped you in your journey in either way, through professionalism or through your
Sure.
personal life?
That's a great question. I might be missing some people when I talk about this, but certainly when I first went on shift after maybe a month, um, my shift leader at that time asked me how it was going. And I said, oh, I'm a bit bored on nights. And he said, a bit bored. And then he just pointed at the manuals, because back then everything came in paper manuals, in binders. Look at all those manuals. There's just too much information to get bored. And that resonated with me. So I started reading, and the first thing I taught myself was a bit of Rex, and then we looked for use cases, and I started developing. So from that perspective, I would say anybody that helps you but doesn't actually teach you, but shows you the tools of what
Yes.
to do. So here's a manual, here's a red book on something from IBM. Those are that was important to me, to understand that learning is just as important as a skill as being able to do. The capability of learning is an incredibly important skill to develop. Then I'm going to say my dad, not because he's in IT or anything like that, but he once said to me when I was maybe a teenager, if you don't do it, who is going to do it?
Yeah.
And there are times when I've seen opportunities in the IT industry to make change, and that those words drove me on, because I knew that if I looked around, there was no one else that was going to do it. I couldn't say, "Hey, dude, can you pick this up?" So it's about starting the journey yourself, and
Mhm.
if people come along on the journey or you influence people, happy days. So that was important. For a long time, I worked with an individual that's still working in the industry, Emlyn Williams, at a retail bank in the UK. And Emlyn and I had very different backgrounds. He came from a very strong application development. I was more infrastructure with application development. And he taught me
Okay.
the power of simplicity. Let's not overcomplicate where we don't have to. So him and I worked together for a dozen years, and we created lots of test harness things that everybody, we had contractors come into the team, and they were able to use, because they were simple. They used logic, and creating simple things develops resilience and stops failure. So that was exciting to work with him. I then went to work for a guy who was the CEO of CompuWare, who's now at a SEAM organization, and that's Chris O'Malley. He used to talk about passionate explorers, where people are not deterred by snidey comments or any kind of condescending activities. Just if you believe in something, go ahead and passionately explore that, even if it does lead to a dead end. Going back to my point about not everything is successful, but be a passionate explorer. So Chris O'Malley at it was Logarithm. I can't remember who they got taken over by, but Chris O'Malley's in the industry. He's definitely worth following for his comments. He's an incredibly good individual as a human, as well as a genuine leader. He leads from the front rather than pushing from the back. And then who else have I got? GSUK. I've got Joe Winchester, who I see is on your podcast
Yeah.
episode list, and also Louisa Sears. They work quite closely geographically in Hursley for IBM, and Joe's long tenured like I am. Louisa is younger, newer into the organisation, but she brings with her exactly what I was talking about earlier. She came into the GSUK organisational team, and she made suggestions that nobody had ever made before, because she saw the way we were doing things was potentially inefficient. Made suggestions, we explored them, and they worked brilliantly. So I would say Joe and Louisa have been fantastic to work with on the GSUK application development track, because they are different, and the diversity between the three of our minds brings betterment. Certainly in the most recent times, they've made organising GSUK as much fun as it's ever been.
All right. Okay, so yeah, thank you so much, Stuart, for joining this episode and for sharing your expertise, and also for letting us know about the real fact about the mainframe, because we all know that regarding mainframe there are lots of myths around in the market. So, but the people people like you only like do these kind of talks in order to provide them actual facts, not just the thing that we usually learn from the documentation, but you share your own experience. So really thank you so much for sharing those all information with everyone.
No worries. Thank you for the invite. Really enjoyed our time together.
Thank you so much.